All right, we're back on the record. At this time, we'll go to the Fisheries Committee with Commissioner McMillan.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. At this time, we're going to ask Chief Fisheries Bobby Wilson to make a presentation concerning Asian carp.
Thank you, Commissioner McMillan. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce a person on our staff. He's new to our staff. He's not new to TWA, but he's new to the Fisheries Division. He's to become, he is our new statewide hatchery coordinator as well as aquatic nuisance species work. David Wright, you can stand up, raise your hand one, but he's been a hatchery manager at Springfield Fish Hatchery and just still working back and forth. And we just recently hired a new guy to take his place, and so he's going to be working with him to do some training. But David is up in our office, and even though I think we need another full-time aquatic nuisance species person, at least for the time being, David's going to handle some of that. I'm going to start with a video. Everybody starts with videos. And most of you, or many of you may have seen it. It's the one about the silver carp, the Asian carp. And it's about a 5-minute video. It shows the lighter side of this, but then it's a very serious subject, and then it gets into a little more seriousness and then has a message to it. So those who have seen it before, maybe you'll appreciate watching it again. I like to watch it every time I see it. So, Jason, you help me out? Huh? Not me.
I'm Bill Dance. You know, someone once said that all I had to do was snap my fingers and fish would jump in the boat. I guess they were right. Someone once said that all I had to do was snap my fingers and fish would jump in the boat. Snap my fingers and fish would jump in the boat. Jump in the boat. They lied. Boat's too high. If I had my hat. Yeah, they would get one like that. Yeah. We were on an oxbow just south of Memphis, Tennessee, a body of water called McKellar Lake, which leads directly into the Mississippi River. Now, what you saw were juvenile silver carp, one of 4 non-native carps from Asia that are absolutely invading our waters. These things are becoming detrimental, and when I say detrimental, I'm saying detrimental with a capital D. You're gonna get them up. They're detrimental for a number of reasons. They're extremely prolific. And seriously, I cannot see the bottom for these things. They're so thick on the grass. It's just solid. And they're filter feeders, meaning they feed on tiny microscopic plankton. Because of their tremendous numbers, they're displacing our native fish that eat plankton, such as shad, paddlefish, young game fish, and other forms of forage. We should be seeing shad, and lots of shad. Both gizzard and threadfin, but we're just not seeing them. We don't catch the shad minnows that we used to catch in the Mississippi River and in the bays and the tributaries off of the river. Both the threadfin and the gizzards, they're very, very difficult to find. You might be wondering, so what? If they're so much like shad, our game fish will just eat them instead. Well, the problem is they grow so doggone fast that in less than a year, they're too big for most game fish to eat. These are the silver carp, and they'll range 40 to 60 pounds. The big head carps will range even bigger than that. There's been some known to have caught as much as 90 pounds. Many people may confuse these things with freshwater herring, or they may confuse them with shad. But they're not a shad and they're not a herring. This fish on the top is your gizzard shad, and this is your silver carp. They have a split tail, and they look similar as far as coloration. But look at the bulge eyes, look at the bigger mouth, has an overhanging lip, bottom lip here. This lip here is just kind of rounded off. Just imagine how hard it would be to tell the silver carp and gizzard shad apart if they weren't side by side. Now imagine a net full of them and how easy it would be for an angler to unknowingly move these fish around to another lake or river. One thing an angler definitely doesn't want to do, you don't want to transport this fish to any pond, any other waterway. I mean, absolutely not. It's bad enough that these silver carp compete with our native fish for food and space, but they also have another bad habit. They sail through the air. They're tremendous jumpers. So just imagine what a 25-pounder, even a 10-pounder could do if it hit a water skier or someone going fast in a boat. These silver bullets can hurt you, and they can hurt you in a mighty big way. And there are several documented cases of that happening. The take-home message is this: the silver carp and other invasive species affect our native fish population in a bad way, a really bad way, and it's getting worse. They're a hazard to boaters and other water recreational users. They can easily be mistaken for native bait fish. But the safest thing to do, if you're in doubt, just don't transport any shad, any herring, any of these things to any other waterways. That's extremely important. I wish this thing would kill them. Leave the head section alone and just take the major part of the fillet. Mercy sakes alive.
All right. Thanks to our good friend Bill Dance for helping us with that. No, it's wrong one. It's there. Okay. We've got a lot of aquatic nuisance species, or ANS, in our state. And I'm not going to talk about all of them today, but the Asian carp are just a few of about 55 or so that we've identified that are aquatic nuisance in our state. And for another day, I'll save this presentation, or maybe David Roddy will, to talk about the aquatic nuisance species. But I'm just going to talk and focus on Asian carp for today. And just a little bit about Asian carp. They include 4 species of fish as Asian carp. One of them is a grass carp. They also called them, actually called the white moor. We call them grass carp as a common name. And they were brought into this country probably 40 years ago to control aquatic vegetation in ponds and aquaculture industry. We've not really had a serious problem with them in our state, not in Tennessee. Some states do, but we don't, because most of our bodies of water are man-made, with the exception of Reelfoot Lake. Some of the lakes up north that have natural lakes, they have vegetation in there, and they can cause problems up there. But they're not really a serious problem in our state, but they are one of the 4 listed species. We approve them for stocking now. They have to be the sterile species where they can't reproduce. They call them triploids. And so anyway, that's what we've got now in our state for the approved for stocking in ponds and in private lakes. There's another one called the black carp. It's very similar in appearance to the grass carp. And our biggest concern about these is they eat snails and mussels. Of course, we have a lot of those in our state, mussels anyway, and we're concerned about them, how they may affect or impact our native population of mussels. Kentucky Lake being probably at one time the biggest exporter for commercial mussel species like washboards and ebony shells, as well as the federally endangered and threatened species of mussels in places like the Duck River, where we're concerned about them. They've been reported captured in Louisiana, Arkansas, Illinois, Missouri, but they never were reported to be caught in Tennessee until about 2 months ago. This was caught at the mouth of the Obion River and the Mississippi River. It's a very large black carp specimen, and probably weighed about 60 pounds. Unfortunately, the commercial fishermen took a picture of it and thinking it might be a blue sucker because they'd never seen a black carp before. They let it go live. So when we saw the picture and we got back in touch with the commercial fishermen and other commercial fishermen in that area and let them know that if they ever catch another one, be sure and not let it go live. We'd like to have it. And so within a week, we got another one, by the way. And so we've collected 2 black carp from Tennessee waters. Then there's the silver carp, and then there's the bighead carp, which is probably, I'm gonna focus on both of those species today. Let you know, all these carp, Asian carp, they do obviously come from Asia, but they more specifically come from China. And they were brought in by the aquaculture industry for various purposes. The grass carp for aquatic vegetation control, the black carp for the control of snails. Snails are a host for a specific life stage of a parasite, these worms that get into the meat of fish, and they brought them in to control that for the catfish industry. And the silver carp and the bighead carp are filter feeders, and they brought them in to control that because a lot of times these aquaculture ponds, they get a algae bloom, it causes the fish to taste bad. They call it off flavor. So they brought all these in as biological control for those things. Unfortunately, most catfish ponds in our country are located, at least in the southeast, in the Mississippi River Delta. And when we had some serious floods in the Mississippi River back in the 80s and 90s and allowed these fish to escape into the water, and that's how we got them. So we began sampling pretty intensively in the Mississippi River in the late 90s, all the way to through about 2008. And when we first got out there, probably in 98 or 99, we caught a couple of bighead carp. They were sort of a novelty. We'd never seen one before. We thought they were kind of cool. We thought, all right, we got some bighead carp. And then it wasn't long, maybe just a couple of years after that, we noticed that they weren't exactly the same. And in this picture here, the one on the top is a silver carp, and the 2 on the bottom are bighead carp. So we were calling them all silver carp, but they probably were bigheads until the silver started showing up. But then again, there's another novelty fish. Weren't too worried about them. Didn't know much about them. Nobody in the country knew much about them. They were so new, and didn't think much of them. Hope that they wouldn't impact our fisheries. And then, as you saw in the video, about 2005, that was McKellar Lake. That's when we really started seeing some reproduction. So it didn't take long, probably about 5 years after we first saw the first silver carp, at least we saw them, we started seeing reproduction in our waters. So a little bit about these. The silver carp can get as big as 60 pounds or larger, and a bighead carp can exceed 100 pounds. They have very rapid growth. They may spawn multiple times. And, of course, the silver carp can jump 8+ feet out of the water, as you also saw in the video. A little bit about their distribution now. They, the gray and the blue areas, they're showing pretty much the Mississippi River Basin and a few points beyond, but mostly the Mississippi River Basin. They're anywhere that a boat can lock through a dam or something like that, you're going to find these things going. And in Tennessee, of course, the Mississippi River, the squiggly line to the far left, and then the line next to that is the Kentucky Lake, Tennessee portion of Kentucky Lake, and then the other one I'll see if I get this area. Right in this area right here is Lake Barkley and Cheatham. They've really shown up there in the last couple of years, more and more every year. We get reports, concerns about them being in there, anglers seeing them, commercial fishermen seeing them, jumping into boats, wondering what we're going to do about them. The blue areas are kind of the leading edge where they're reported. They're not in tremendous numbers yet. But like in the same in Tennessee, wherever a barge can go through or a boat can lock through a dam, they're going to migrate through. And there's nothing we could have done about it with the exception of closing the gates, the locks at Kentucky Dam and Barkley Dam back probably about 15 years ago, which wasn't going to happen. So why should we care? Well, they impact the environment. Tennessee is the most biodiverse state in the country. We have 315 species of fish, 120 species of mussels, and 87 species of crawfish. It also impacts the economy. $1 billion at least from sport fishing. And this is probably a conservative estimate, $13 million from commercial fish. It also impacts human health because obviously when jump out of the water, they can smack somebody in the head, it could cause injuries. And it could impact the boating industry as well, because people are not gonna wanna go out and ride a boat or a jet ski or something like that if they got if there's a good chance they may get smacked by one of these things. So what is being done to stop this? This picture is actually taken in Kentucky, but it's a paddlefish that's in very emaciated condition, very skinny paddlefish on an oxbow that was full of Asian carp as well. I attended the Asian Carp Management Control Workshop in Peoria, Illinois in 2006. That was when I first learned about some problems, not just problems with them, but potential control methods and what's being discussed, what are some of the solutions, a lot about the biology of them. And after I left there, I felt pretty good about Tennessee, because at the time they said that you need about 50 to 100 miles of free-flowing water, rivers like in the Mississippi River, for these to be able to reproduce. And all of ours are impounded, they're dammed up, so they won't really have a lot of free-flowing areas, but we're pretty sure they've figured, the Asian carp have figured out how to adapt to that. And then MICRA stands for the Mississippi Interstate Cooperative Resources Association. Is made up of 28 state fisheries chiefs, and that's basically the Mississippi River Basin. All states whose waters flow into the Mississippi River have a representative there. And a part of that MICRA is the MRBP, which stands for the Mississippi River Basin Panel on Aquatic Nuisance Species. There's an Asian carp work group, and focusing on prevention, containment, and control. Tennessee has also become part of the Ohio River Asian Carp Action Plan and Committee. And then there's an Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force, which is a national force or committee that's made up of Fish and Wildlife Service folks and state folks as well. The Great Lakes Resource Initiative, I'm not going to speak much about that, but you'll hear more about that after my presentation. And then we have a Tennessee Aquatic Nuisance Species Management Plan that we developed and the governor signed back in 2008, which focuses not only on Asian carp but other species as well. So our attention really has just been, until recent times, focusing on public education, and this is a poster showing what they look like, and then of course the Bill Dance Asian carp DVD, which we have Tennessee paid for a lot of, but the Fish and Wildlife Service produced a bunch and sent them out to different states for them to show it to groups and people like us. And we have the Asian carp watch cards, and I've got some of these right here that I'll be glad to pass out. Take one of those. I think actually somebody else gave me these, but we've got plenty of these. There's a whole stack of these up here, and then we've got some more that we'll probably pass out later. Asian carp solutions. So what can you do? Well, research going on right now. There's a lot of money, especially up in the Great Lakes area, focusing on research. What can be done to try to control them? One of the areas they've looked at is genetics, where they might somehow manipulate a female Asian carp, and she's introduced in the water. Their offspring will be entirely males. That research is still a long way away, or they got a long way to go for that. That'll work here on our fish. Pheromones are attractants, chemicals in the water produced by a fish when they're trying to mate. We can figure out a way to mass produce that and kind of draw these fish up into a certain area. We might be able to eliminate some that way. And there's toxicants. There's talk about that. Unfortunately, all the toxicants now that we use will kill all fish and not just Asian carp. So, and there's other things like diseases they're focusing on, but these are 5 to 10 years away at least. We've got a problem with them now. We've got to do something about them now. If we wait 10 years or more, we won't have many native fish to focus on. At least we may not have many. So the area that a lot of folks are agreeing on is maybe they need to be controlled by commercial fishing methods. If there's one thing commercial fishermen can do, they can catch fish. And there's a market in China right now. They'll reportedly will take about 90 million pounds a year. I may be way off on that, but that's a significant number of fish. Domestic markets, there's starting to be a domestic market in our country now where if people can just get over the name carp, call them something else, they're being called and labeled silverfin, or I've heard different than Kentucky salmon, just different names. But if they can just get over the name of carp, then they actually taste pretty good. And then there's also some plants that are actually being they're already open, and some that are being constructed and retrofitted to make fish meal. I think someone told me that in Chile that was a big fish meal supplier there, but they fished out all their fish they were using, so there may be a bigger demand here in our country. And fish meals, meaning people can eat them. So if that, again, the domestic market, people figure out they taste good, we think there'll be a bigger market. We think that demand in that market is growing. So the next step, they have I say mega processing plants in Mississippi River Basin. Illinois has got a couple. Kentucky doesn't have a mega processing plant, but they've got a place where the fishermen can take their fish, and then the folks from Illinois will come down and pick their fish up. And then they've also are going to be, maybe already, but they're constructing a plant in Wickliffe, Kentucky. It's a smaller version, but it's got potential to grow bigger. And Tennessee is a question mark there. We think that's what we're going to have here. Unfortunately, it's like, where does the money come from for that? I think a lot of people don't want to invest a lot of money into something they don't know if there's enough fish here to saturate or satisfy the market. We think there is, but it's a pretty good investment. I don't have good figures, but I've heard it's somewhere around $3.5 million for initial investment for those. So we have the markets like in China, and with the fishermen, we know they can catch them, but we just got to figure out a way to get those fish to the markets. And if they're up in Illinois, our fishermen, they don't pay enough for the fish for that to make them worthwhile to drive all the way up there with those fish at 10 to 15 cents a pound. So there needs to be like ice trucks or some form of transportation to get these fish, so they don't have to drive so far and spend so much money on gas. Even if the price is low like that, they can make money because of the sheer volume of these fish. So if they can just get that market created and that step going to those markets, we know commercial fishermen will reduce carp numbers. So the final goal is to export and develop domestic markets until the Asian carp numbers dwindle, reduce the number until research develops, but the ultimate goal is to eliminate Asian carp no matter what method we choose. Now I want to stop here. This is the end of my presentation, but I've invited a special guest to speak. I mentioned Illinois a couple of times. You saw some of the credits that were given in the video about Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And I've invited Kevin Irons. He is a fisheries biologist from Illinois DNR. I think his official title is the program coordinator for hatcheries and aquatic nuisance species, but he is like the Asian carp expert. And through some of the money that's been appropriated for the Great Lakes work, he's been able to travel and spread the word about what's going on up there, and he can give testimony about what Illinois is doing and what they're doing in regards to commercial fishing. And so, in other words, Kevin's on his dime. It didn't cost the agency a penny for him to come down here. But Kevin, if you'd like to come up here now. I'll try to figure out.
Thanks, Bobby. And thanks for ordering up some wonderful weather. I've already sent pictures home. I've seen plants in the ground. I'll go home to snow on the ground. So yeah, much of my work is consumed with Asian carp. Although I'm an aquatic nuisance species biologist, there's a lot, like Bobby said, there's many species to be concerned about, things from viruses, VHS in the Great Lakes that's trying to get down to our Mississippi River Basin, but these are taking a lot of time. One is they're jumping from the water and people notice them. So they're a big concern we have. I'm also the aquaculture program manager, a little bit different than the hatcheries, but it's about importation, stuff coming into the state, but also very relevant. I'll pause just a little bit to kind of share some of the videos, either agency electrofishing boats out on the water and one just driving down the river It's a big deal in Illinois. On the Illinois River, we probably have more fish per mile than anywhere in the world. And of course, only the silver carp jump. Those big head carp, although they're massive, they don't jump into the air. So those, I unfortunately was involved with all those sampling events. And as Bobby said, one of the reasons that we're so well funded is Illinois is not a good economic place, but the Great Lakes is vitally connected through Chicago, and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative has funded our work to work in the Illinois River to keep them through electric barriers and this other technology from getting into the next Great Basin. So I think we can make a lot of great strides in Illinois and our rivers, but the goal then is to keep them out of the Great Lakes. And there are large rivers, you know, as Bobby showed you the map. I'm not going to dilly-dally on a lot of these slides because we've seen some of the information. But one thing, when we talk about carp, it is a four-letter word. People have a very negative connotation with carp. They always say, oh, I tried carp 30 years ago. Well, that's the common carp. So it is a different species. These were introduced 100 and some years ago across the U.S. But when people, the public, actually thinks about carp, this is what they're envisioning. And as fisheries biologists, we're rather simple, so my quick biology lesson is the carp with the big head on the very bottom is a big head carp. The carp on the top that's mostly silver is a silver carp, and the one in the middle, as Bobby mentioned, that eats grass is a grass carp. That's fisheries. And they're some of the most cultured fish in the world. Russia, obviously China, it's exclusively an aquaculture event in China now. They're overfished in their large rivers, which gives us hope that commercial fishing is a great tool, but it's driven by seed farms, hatcheries, raising them up and harvesting them out. This is a big head carp. She was about 43 pounds, over 2.2 million eggs. Thank God for interns. And we already saw, you know, they can, this is the actual places where they've been found for big head carp. This is a silver carp, and not only the silver color, they do have a crease underneath them that helps you identify those two different species. And that's a silver carp, a little more restrained, but quickly catching up to the big head carp in geographical range. And this is basically spawning. What we know about the Asian carp is they take these large rivers, the Mississippi River, the Ohio, the Missouri, the Illinois River to reproduce. They spawn in the middle of the main channel. The female turns upside down and the males come to her. So we don't know how small of a river they can go to. We've seen reproduction in the Wabash River in Indiana, a very long river. It disturbs me to hear that they're maybe spawning in the Tennessee River. But all that information together tells us where they may or may not be able to spawn in the Great Lakes Basin, which is important to me, but also inland from these reservoirs where we already see them. Without a river, without a flowing system, we don't expect them to reproduce. And unfortunately, we've seen on the Illinois River, we've seen small 1 or 2 inch fry. We've often caught eggs as well. So we've seen spawns in 2007 in early July, late July, and the middle of August. So maybe 3 spawning periods throughout the time. The following year is just all in the spring and even more massive. And there's kind of a weird sense of, I want to go see these things. We have a lot of photojournalism, people coming to see them, but it's one of the nuisance species we can use as a poster child to get out the aquatic nuisance species problem, because this is one we can see, and we can feel the impacts with, and we can see the skinny fish, and that's important. Generally, this is just about silver carp on the Illinois River. I guess I'll just point you there. Up to 13 metric tons of silver carp per river mile. And that wasn't including the small fish. Those are just, 15 inches and above. So a lot of biomass out there. And here's one of your fish, a world line class record for big head carp. I think it was snagged on the Tennessee River, 94 pounds. They get very large. I've also seen specimens over 150 pounds from South America or Europe. Skip through that again. We already know they eat the plankton, and that's the building block. All small fish eat plankton, and Bill Dance showed very nicely. Things like buffalo, our large river species, paddlefish, gizzard shad, threadfin shad, eat plankton and zooplankton specifically. And for the layman, that's the green stuff in the water. And this is a silver carp feeding right below the surface, and it doesn't look that menacing until you see a lot of silver carp feeding right below the surface. So you can see it's at thousands of fish out there can really change the food webs. And we've seen the loss of our large-bodied zooplanktons, our copepods and cladocerans, and it goes to a very small rotifer, small-driven, fast-growing algae, essentially. So I don't want to go down to the technical part, but it changes the food web. And this is the way they can do that. Bighead carp have these comb-like gill rakers, looks like a barber's comb, very fine, that can filter and sieve the water. The silver carp goes one step further, and it's actually kind of molded or melded together, looks like a sponge. So they can actually filter down about 8 microns. And these are our native species. This is a bigmouth buffalo and a gizzard shad are a couple species that are very vital to the food webs of our rivers. And the research on the Illinois River has shown a decline in their condition. They're skinnier after Asian carp are abundant. And we're at the rate of 5 or 7% decline. That's beginning to affect things like egg production and how successful they're going to be. Bighead carp themselves are actually getting skinnier. This is one from the Missouri River, but you can see it's just wafer thin, a real big head and no body. So they're even struggling for food. So they're outcompeting our native stocks. So we do need to remove them from the water. Just another diagram that they're skinnier in different rivers. The ones that they've been the longest, the blue, the Missouri River, they're thinner. And we've seen that over time, is that they start off very fat and robust on the Illinois River, and then they get skinnier through time as their numbers increase. And you can see that on the Ohio. You can see that on the Wabash. The other ones have very similar trajectories. I will go very quickly because we're interested in the Great Lakes. This was not connected historically. You can see through this area, there was a basin divide. And because of pollution in Chicago, essentially their sewers were going out into Lake Michigan. They're drawing their water in. It was a human health problem. Now we have this connection, which is quite large, and this is the location of an electric barrier. Actually, we're trying to artificially separate these barriers, these basins again. And you know, some people may quickly say we can fill that basin in, a couple of shovel loads of dirt, but the Chicago Sanitary Ship Canal is up on top, and it's compared to other well-known canals like the Suez, the Panama, the Welland, the Erie canals. This is much larger, 34 feet deep, 160 foot wide for a long length. It's a significant system and still vital for the health of Chicago. So again, we have the GLRI, we have this Asian Carp Regional Coordinating Committee that has come together to really get on top of the issue, give us the best informed responses. I mentioned the electric barrier. There's 3 barriers that operate together. 2 are always on at the same time. And you can see the progression from 2002 through 2011. Those have been set up. Before those other barriers were set up, we had to go in and road node actually 7 miles of canal. We had to turn them off to do maintenance, needed maintenance. We didn't have a backup at that point. We only had the one, so we had to road node and actually found 1 bighead carp just below the barrier. Although that was it, and we haven't caught another fish since. This is the general distribution of Asian carp when it comes to Illinois. You can see the Ohio River, but what's missing is all these tributaries. I tried to put them here on the yellow lines that go out into the state of Illinois, as they do saturate those tributaries as far up as the dam that's impassable. So 110 miles up through central Illinois in both directions. And this is where we see reproduction. We do not see reproduction in the upper Illinois River for whatever reason. And it only goes up so far, and then we get our rogue fish going up the Ohio. This is just exactly what Bobby showed you, but obviously this is why we're here. The Tennessee River, and it comes in and goes throughout your state. We're seeing rogue individuals and the hint that they might be reproducing. So that's definitely a concern. You don't want to see those jumping videos in Kentucky Lake, Barkley Lake. So our strategy is kind of a 3-tiered. You can kind of see a natural way it breaks down. Working towards Chicago, where the fish are very rare. We've only caught 1 directly below the barrier, 1 up in Chicago, up in this area. And essentially that one actually probably came from a channel catfish stocking of an urban pond. I'll talk about that just briefly. The second area is this area where they're not reproducing. We think we stand the greatest opportunity to remove fish there because we don't have this reproduction revitalizing them. And then our commercial fishers. We have 1,300 licensed commercial fishers in Illinois. We think they can do a real bang-up job of reducing the overall populations. We've already seen the lack of the big heads. The numbers are dropping. And we're doing some research to vet this all out. But essentially what we've done is combine those areas where we're going to use commercial fishing and harvest to kind of integrate a good scientific design. All this information is available on asiancarp.us. If you haven't been there, you can see multiple reports. We have our annual work plans that are published on there. We also have an annual summary report. What did we see when we were out there doing what we said we did, and what are things that are going on? These are pretty exhaustive. This one's 130 pages. I think it's going to be much larger than that this next year. 18 projects are detailed in there, although there's much more going on. We heard about the applying pesticides to Asian carp specifically. They figured it out. They've got a little, I call it a little Asian carp M&M. They can put poison in there, and they think it's really species specific. They can put it at a size where only Asian carp can filter it out. So those things are being done by USGS and not included in my talk today, but I wanted to let you hint. Some of these things are really close. So in the cause, basically, we're looking out through these canals and these artificial waterways at 5 different spots, and we're randomizing throughout. Exhaustive effort, 10,000 person-hours of sampling. We're using contracted commercial fishers, people who know how to catch these. We're bringing them up there and say, go catch me a carp. So we're paying for them to go where I think they're the experts. But we're also using electrofishing. We've also used some design gears. I'll talk about 30-foot gill nets to help catch these fish. The good news is we haven't caught any big head or silver carp. And actually we have a recommendation. The blue doesn't come through here, but we're actually going to reduce some of the monitoring above. We're going to keep our contracted fishing. That's our best tool. We're going to focus a little bit more down below where we also don't catch very many of them to figure out how many rogue fish might be pushing it. We really think we can push back that leading edge. We're also using a tool called eDNA. And it's controversial. We're out there, I mean, everybody's watching NCIS or CSI. You go out to a crime scene, you sample, in this case, 2 liters of water, you filter it down onto a pad, and you take it to the lab, and it says, yes, there's a silver carp there. Yes, there's a big head carp there. And we are finding silver carp eDNA, and there's a real good assessment called an ECALS project coming out in a month. Essentially, when we look for silver carp eDNA, whether it's on boats or even nets, we're finding it. We're finding it in sewers that are leading from Chinese fish markets. So it's not the clear. A silver carp eDNA hit does not mean a live swimming fish. So it's being confusing up right at that leading edge. So we're trying to figure out what this all means and how to use it as a tool. We actually have a matrix of how we respond if we get eDNA, which is what we've done in the past. And then if we find multiple fish, we've got agency responses, all in keeping things out of the Great Lakes. One of those responses, if we get a bunch of hits, like in the North Shore of Chicago, we'll go out there with 2 commercial fishers, 4 electrofishing boats. We'll block it off. We'll sample it for 2 days to make sure there's not a lot of fish up there. And that's our assessment. You know, if there's fish out there, after 10,000 person-hours worth of work, we don't, there's not a lot. There may be just a few or none. We're innovative. I think we're using tools like this is a Great Lake style fyke net or pound net. Goes surface to bottom and anywhere from, they can be custom designed. This one actually will isolate a whole backwater lake. And you can see how it goes out into the lake and blocks them off. It looks like a big trap. And we can put that in place. We had it in place for 107 days above the electric barrier and didn't catch a carp. We fished it below and caught hundreds of carp. Well below, 50 miles below. And we're using these other tools. Again, learning from our commercial fishers, we can actually use gill nets 30-foot deep. Those are hauled to get in and out of the boat. We're using 6-foot diameter hoop nets, which they use down here in the lower Mississippi very successfully to catch Asian carp. And I'm going to skip over this. This is just one lake that we looked at and just beat to death. And it's one place where carp show up, and we go back and we don't find any. We do things over those electric barriers because they do have to be turned off for maintenance, and we use those special gears. We actually go in between active barriers where there's very little electricity and put these down in there. We can remove fish. We've removed maybe 15 fish over 12 inches, common carp generally. But we use hydroacoustic technology to actually tell us if there's fish in those regions or not. We're using things like hydro guns, which we think can move fish or even destroy small fish. Those deep water shocking rigs and those deep gill nets in those areas. I mentioned we caught one fish above the electric barrier, and we have looked in 24 different lakes and ponds in Chicago, a highly urbanized area, and we found that bighead carp have been there for quite a while. We've sampled 21 ponds, and those 14 were sampled this last year. We're finding some huge fish, some over 80 pounds. So they've been there for probably 15 years before it was illegal to move them as contaminants in catfish because they're doing a catch and release program. So we continue to look, not because they're connected necessarily. We had a couple that were, there's currently no fish in there, but we're worried about people catching them and then releasing them and moving them around. So if we can find these populations, we'll remove them. And usually it's just 3 or 3 to 4 fish. We're also looking in those Asian food markets. So there's a desire to eat these, and it's a wedding tradition, it's a celebration, it's a New Year's tradition to have live Asian carp. Because they don't trust the source or the quality, they want them alive. They haven't bought into the frozen. Now, the markets we have gone to, they've all been dead on ice, but we continue to look at it. Toronto, Canada, had a $5 million a year live Asian carp market until it was made illegal. And we're looking at retail live bait surveys. We've gone through 50 of the shops in Chicago area. We have not seen Asian carp. We've used DNA. We've looked for individuals. We haven't seen it in ours, but there is suspicion that it could be a contamination again, and we have to keep a close eye on that. And we can look downriver. So what can you do with a commercial fish? Bobby mentioned we can eat it. Liquid fish fertilizer. Minimum process, we don't have to eat it. The carp name is not so bad. Fish meals. We've got these processed fish burgers or just fried up. I think you'll find it's a really good tasting fish. We've taken it to the Taste of Chicago, a really big culinary event in Chicago. This is our jalapeno chutney sauce on a ground up Asian carp burger. We had them lined up, the biggest place in the downtown. We're giving these things out. People loved them. They're very good. In particular, Target Hunger Now, we think a low-cost protein can go into places like food pantries, help support protein, because protein is the biggest cost in people that can't find good quality food. And it is healthy. I mean, here you see silver carp and bighead carp fillets, and this is just looking at mercury, but compared to things that we normally eat, like orange roughy, but it compares favorably with catfish as far as content and problems in there. So there is good use for these fish. And again, getting down to the research, barrier defense, that area where they're not reproducing, we've spent a lot of money into removing these fish, actually getting them out. So we go out there and we've spent 643 miles of nets deployed in the last 3 years. We've removed almost 1.5 million pounds of Asian carp. This is contracting, again, with commercial fishers on this leading edge. These more moderate populations, they know how to get them out. So just this last year, 871 net sets, 293 miles of net. We go out every other week, and we catch fish. We remove them. We started landfilling. We thought that was a waste. So we actually pinged our Illinois constituents. One of those, a Schaefer Fish Corporation, said, we'll take them. And he's actually making that liquid fish fertilizer out of it. So 290 tons of carp just this last year. And we're working throughout the winter. Actually, fishermen know you can catch these guys in the winter. They slow down a bit. We actually prefer to fish in the wintertime. It's a lot of hard work. This seine haul is a half a mile long. So this is the very cod end as we're pulling it to shore. And we can fish it 3/4 of a mile long. There has been historic catches farther down on the Illinois River where they can get 100,000 pounds out in one single haul. It takes 2 or 3 days to remove the fish out of the water. So we're hoping to see that type of success. But we started fishing this winter to try to get even more out. It's going to be part of our solution. So is it working? These are our catch rates from our efforts, our DNR efforts from those contracted commercial fishers. And it's a moderate response, but you have to understand this is 2012. And we're actually targeting some of these fish by our hydroacoustic. We have people out there doing telemetry and other work. They say, hey, we think there's a lot of fish here, so we'll send our commercial fishers there. So these might be elevated to what actually these people were fishing for. Just a blind set or our best judgment has been improved. So efficiency is higher. So this decline might even be more relevant. So it appears up in where they're not reproducing that this is working for us. We're not taking a lot of sport fish out. These are active sets. We're setting the nets, we're pounding, moving the fish by noise into the nets and removing them. These aren't dead sets. We're not killing fish. We're pulling out the native fish and the sport fish. About 2% of them are sport fish. They go right back in the water. We're not killing these fish. And then the other things we have to look at are just to identify how many fish are out there. I showed you one study already. How are they moving? Immigration, emigration, that's natural mortality, and that goes beyond me into big, robust models to see, can we do this on a river scale? And so we're trying to integrate this, and the dynamics are these big open systems are tough to work in. But Southern Illinois University is doing a bulk of this. One of them was a 3 million pound order. They ordered 1 million pounds of meal. So it takes 3 million pounds of fish to get that out. And they fished the lower Illinois River. And we have seen, I won't go into the detail, but we have seen population size structure change. It's gone smaller. Relative abundance, catch per unit effort, how many fish in each net is down. And things like sex ratios. The bigger fish are actually females. We see more males now than females. So we're changing the population dynamics of what's going on out there. So we can notice when only 3 million pounds are being removed, in addition to our commercial fishing effort, which may be as high as 10 million pounds a year in Illinois. And that just kind of shows, as the commercial guys are fishing, we do see this curve. That does suggest that the fish are also becoming harder to catch. We're also pinging fish with hydroacoustics, over 3,400 miles of hydroacoustic surveys, the length of a 300-mile long river, to ping fish. And we looked in backwaters here in 2012. So we're looking at things like externally tagged fish, emigration rates, exploitation rates. We're catching over 76% of the fish in any given backwater when we're out there. We're looking at immigration. That is considerable, whether they're coming from downstream or out in the main channel. We do think that late season harvest may be important because of the immigration issues. We can target those fish better. And we're going to develop a model. I'm not a modeler, but we're catching all these fish. This is one of the tagged fish. We're catching all this information, trying to figure out how can we judge. We don't want to spend this money if it's not making a difference. So we showed you those tagged fish. And we're also doing otolith microchemistry. So we're working in these large systems. We can take a bone out of their head and tell you where it was born. So most of the bighead carp are actually born in the Illinois River, but about 30% of them of the silver carp came from the Mississippi or the Missouri River into the Illinois. So this is a bigger picture than just what's going on in Illinois. And I just want to make a plug for what Bobby was talking about. National efforts are going to be important. I think that's where our states, the micro-states, the Mississippi states, the Ohio River states, need to work really hard with the congressionals and get a national dialogue of not only about Asian carp, but other aquatic nuisance species. We need to do something on a grand scale to really make a difference. Else I can remove most of them from the Illinois River and they'll filter back in, so it'll just be an ongoing problem. You saw those pictures earlier, and these are the same pictures. This is what a length frequency distribution of all those hydroacoustic surveys look like. But you can't really see what's going on where you see the color, the red. So we went to a log scale. Essentially, when you get into the fish over 15, 20 inches long, on the Illinois River, and these are 4 different reaches, these are all Asian carp. The white are our native species. So of the large fish, they're almost all Asian carp out in the river. We certainly don't want to see that spread. I mentioned the model, and I'm not going to go in there. There's a lot of things that have to go into this, and that's why we're collecting so much data to figure out what's going on. And we actually just convened last week, a bunch of modelers, and I'm not one of them, but these are people from LSU, from Ohio State, from the Great Lakes states that really can help us figure this out. This is one issue where all the groups from the Great Lakes, the EPA, USGS, a lot of research organizations really across the country are really focused on this issue right now. We're developing new gears. I talked about those already, the water guns. It sounds funny, but this is a big explosion of water underneath the water, and it puts out it's kind of a sound or shock wave that can scare fish. Kind of a new technology. Talked about law enforcement. We don't want them to get around all of our good efforts. And the urban pond monitoring. And this is that 72-pound fish that's in the shed aquarium now. So outreach education or things that I'm not even gonna go into today. So our general, on the upper end of this, it looks like we're doing good. So we're already gonna change our strategy from monitoring the cause where we don't catch any fish. We say, okay, we did that long enough. We're gonna pull that front line back to that electric barrier and then extend it downstream so we can really get a good idea of what's going on. But then the next step is to work this area here where we remove that 1.5 million pounds. We're gonna beat these fish back. There's things that, we can put temporary barriers in with CO2, with those hydroacoustic arrays, and even further drive them back. It's a common picture, but nature may have this already figured out. Getting predators, eagles and pelicans and other fish to help out. Certainly there's kind of a panic, but people in the Great Lakes are very concerned about it. And just the last thought is it's more than our agency can do. It's really all these people and beyond, all the Great Lakes states, even in Canada and Ontario is helping out on this. And so I hope that helps give you an idea of the great extent of work we're doing, but might also give you some tools to use here in Tennessee.
Wow. They're doing a whole lot up there in Illinois that we're not, but you know, if you saw that earlier, I saw on my slide, they were appropriated about $68 or $70 million to combat this. What is your staff up there working just with Asian carp?
I have about 10 people.
10 people. And how much does it cost for the electric barrier?
Well, that's outside of our budget. That's the Corps of Engineers. The light bill alone is about $30,000 to $40,000 a month.
Yeah. So, anyway, but there are some things going on, and the things that they're doing up there will benefit us down here. What they learn, we can use down here. So that's why I wanted Kevin to come down here and speak to let everyone know that there are things happening. Just because it may not look like we're doing anything in Tennessee, we're participating with all these organizations, with MICRA, with Mississippi River Basin Panel, and sharing information and having these workshops and things like that. So.
Does anybody have any questions?
I do. Go ahead,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Stroud.
Stroud?
Kevin, did you say that it's illegal to net them in Canada? Did you say something about Canada or in?
Well, Canada's a partner. I mean, they
Okay.
also are, they've caught 3 fish in Lake Erie, 3 big head carp historically, 10, 15 years ago.
Uh-huh.
We don't think it's a big problem, but fish do find their way there. They probably didn't swim there directly from China. So there are human-mediated places. The Lacey Act certainly makes them illegal since about 2005, 2006, to transport them alive across state lines.
That's what you were saying, to transfer them, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you commented on the Asian market. Was that what the Asian carp market, as far as the
Right.
distribution of it? Was that what you were referring to
Right,
in
Toronto had a $5 million a year market for live fish.
Okay,
For
live.
cultural reasons. I mean, people from China like these fish for wedding dinners and special occasions. So it still happens covertly, they're trying to sneak them across, and that's one law enforcement side of the puzzle we have to continue to address.
Well, here's a question for probably both of you gentlemen. Has there been any incentives offered to the commercial fishermen to possibly, I know like in Virginia on a small scale, in order to reduce the coyote population, they offered $50 per coyote. Do you not think that possibly incentivizing some things for the commercial fishermen as far as a certain amount of poundage for these particular animals would bring them a certain amount? Not just the market, but also something from the agency?
Right, that's been discussed and proposed. I think the wildlife guys can speak for the coyote bounty system, but the problem is that if we put a bounty, let's say we gave them some incentive in Tennessee or bounty, whatever, they would be coming from Missouri, from Illinois, from everywhere, not just Tennessee. So we really would be helping other people out, not Tennessee so much, but almost maybe a national thing could possibly work, but that's a lot of money. But we think the real
Well, I mean,
way
you're
is.
talking about, when you talk about a lot of money for electrical barriers.
No, well, I know.
I mean, I think that before we go into this process, to explore all the options, that is going to be most economical for us as an agency here too, as well.
Well, I think if we can just get the markets developed, and I mean, there's some commercial fishermen here, but I know that by volume alone, if there was a way to get their fish not so far, maybe a little bit closer, they could make some money off that. And then we think that once the domestic market develops, the price per pound is going to go up too, because there's going to be a greater demand.
Well, and I'm also just referring to, regardless of them being able to transfer, I'm asking them, their primary focus, take the fish out of our waters. I don't care what you do with it. Throw them in, use it for fertilizer, but give them that incentive just to get them out of our waters is what
Right.
I'm referring to.
Well, a lot of them do that now because there's not much money for it. They think a lot of them just hit them over the head and
Well,
sink them, so, yeah.
well, okay. Thank you for your.
Is there any other questions?
I have a question. Has Illinois explored the Chinese market? I mean, you've talked to people in China, and what's the,
Well, they're very good. They have money that they can buy fish. We actually have a contract for like 30 million pounds to go to China. Our investment has not been to incentivize the catch, but to invest in the industry. So our Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, which is outside of DNR, with our governor's help, has invested in one of the fish markets to make it bigger. So we've got 2 larger ones. This is going to have a flash freezer so we can get it to China in a reasonable fashion. They're getting close to being, it's been a long, the economy took a downturn. Actually, the freezers that they needed weren't readily available. They had lawsuits over where they wanted to put their building. But essentially, that's what, we're trying to get the markets going and ship them back to China, where culturally they're already accepted, and they have a lot of hungry people.
so who took the lead in that? Was that your Department of Commerce that?
It was our Department of Commerce. They offer grants for any business, and it just happened this is located in a very impoverished area with high unemployment, and so there's a lot of economic factors that said, yes, this made sense for Asian carp in this area. And it is down by St. Louis, not farther up, so that would help do that. Private industry is also developing that meal market in St. Louis, and we expect that to be, they can take 18 million pounds a year once they get going. That's mostly private. They're waiting for that final kick to get over the fence, get on the ground and do something. Does that help?
Well, Mr. Irons, thank you very much for your generosity and bringing your time and taking your time to come down and enlighten us on this. I'm sure that this state and this agency is going to try to monitor what y'all are doing to help us to handle this serious situation. We really certainly appreciate it. It's very generous of you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Commissioner McMillan, if this would be a good time for a break, I'd like to suggest that we take one now, only because we have got samples of Asian carp out there to try for everybody here. It's not enough for, we didn't bring any slaw or french fries or anything like that. We just have the fish. And we also have, in coolers out there, we have specimens, actual specimens of the 4 different species of Asian carp. And they'll have a little sign on it saying which one it is, the black, the grass carp, the silver carp, and big head carp. So that's out there on the patio. I think the food may be inside here in the lobby, so. And then if we take a break, we'll come back and address the commercial fishing stuff.
Okay. All right, let's take a break till 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock.